Rain traced thin silver lines down the window of Ethan Cole's office, blurring the neon glow of the pawn shop sign across the street into a smear of pink and gold. He sat with his boots on the desk, a case file open on his lap that he already knew by heart, because it was his own. Laura Cole. Age 31. Cause of death, single vehicle collision, Route 9, 11:47 p.m. ruled accidental. He'd read that word 1,000 times. Accidental. It never sat right in his chest, no matter how many times the department had closed the file, no matter how many drinks he'd used to try to make it sit right anyway. 3 years now. 3 years since he stopped being Detective Cole and became just Cole, freelance security consultant, the guy people called when they didn't trust the system enough to call the police, or when the police weren't fast enough. He was good at it. Methodical, quiet, thorough. He didn't get close to clients. He didn't get close to anyone. His phone buzzed against the desk. A text from Sarah Nguyen, his old partner, still on the force, still one of the only people who called him just to check if he was breathing. Got a referral for you. Single mom, break-in last night. Nothing stolen but she's shaken. I told her you were the best. Don't make me a liar. He almost let it go to voicemail in his head, a break-in, no theft, probably an ex-boyfriend or a bored teenager. Not his kind of case. But something about the way Sarah had phrased it, nothing stolen, snagged in his mind like a hook in fabric. Burglars who took nothing usually weren't after money. He called the number she'd sent. Mia Whitfield's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that tried hard to look safer than it was, manicured lawns, a community watch sign leaning slightly off its post, streetlights that flickered more than they should. When Ethan pulled up, he noted the busted porch light immediately, the scuff marks near the side door's frame, the way the curtains in the front window were drawn tighter than curtains needed to be. She opened the door before he knocked, like she'd been watching him walk up. Mid-20s, maybe early 30s, dark hair pulled back in a way that looked functional rather than styled, eyes that scanned him head to toe with the wary precision of someone who'd learned the hard way not to trust quickly. "You're the detective," she said. "Not a question." "Consultant now." Ethan Cole. He held up his ID, more habit than necessity. She studied it a beat too long before stepping aside to let him in. The house smelled like lavender and crayons. A child's drawings covered the refrigerator, stick figure families, a yellow sun with too many rays, a dog that didn't exist yet, judging by the hopeful, "Can we get one?" scrawled beneath it in a 6-year-old's handwriting. "Where's your daughter?" Ethan asked. "School. I didn't want her here for this." Mia crossed her arms, a barrier as much as a comfort. "The police already came. Took some photos. Said there wasn't much to go on. Sarah said nothing was stolen." Nothing was. Mia led him to the side door, the one with the scuff marks. They picked the lock. Came in, went through some drawers, and left. My laptop was sitting right there. She pointed to the kitchen counter. Untouched. My jewelry, what little I have, untouched. But my daughter's school folder, the one with her photo and information for the after-school program. Her voice caught, just slightly, just enough that Ethan noticed. That was moved. Like someone had gone through it. Ethan crouched by the door, examining the lock. Clean work. Professional, not opportunistic. You said police found nothing to go on. Did they dust for prints? They said the scene was too clean for prints to matter. Too clean. Another detail that didn't fit a random break-in. Ethan straightened, looking at Mia properly now, really looking, the way he used to when he was still Detective Cole and every witness was a puzzle piece he hadn't placed yet. She was frightened, but she was also careful, in the way people were careful when they'd built a life around hiding something. Ms. Whitfield. Mia. Mia. Has anyone been asking about you? About your daughter? Anyone from your past reaching out, showing up somewhere they shouldn't be? The question landed like a slap. Her arms tightened across her chest. Why would you ask that? Because someone who breaks in and takes nothing but goes through your kid's school folder isn't looking for money. They are looking for information. Where she goes. When she's there. Who picks her up? Mia's face went the color of chalk. I need you to be honest with me, Ethan said, gentler now. If I'm going to help you, I need to know what, or who, I'm protecting you from. For a long moment, Mia said nothing. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. There's someone. From a long time ago. I thought he was dead. Ethan felt something cold settle low in his stomach, the particular chill of a case turning into something bigger than it first appeared. Thought? They never found a body, Mia said. Just wreckage. Everyone told me to move on. I did. I built this, she gestured around the house, at the drawings on the fridge, at the whole fragile architecture of the life she'd made, for her. For Lily. And now? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I'm going to need everything, Ethan said. Every name, every detail, no matter how small or how much it scares you to say out loud. Mia nodded slowly, and for the first time, something in her rigid posture eased, not trust, not yet, but the first crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She turned toward a small desk in the corner of the living room, pulling out a battered manila envelope she'd clearly kept hidden, tucked beneath old tax documents. His name, she said, laying photographs on the table with hands that trembled just slightly, was Victor Reyes. Ethan looked down at the photographs, and stopped breathing for a moment. Because he recognized the face staring back up at him. Not from Mia's story. From his own case files. From the periphery of an investigation he'd run 5 years ago into a money laundering network that had gone cold when its central figure had supposedly died in a boating accident off the coast, an investigation that had, indirectly, put Ethan's name and his family in places he'd never wanted them. An investigation that had started just under a year before Laura died. Where did you find these? Ethan's voice had gone flat, professional, the tone he used when the ground beneath a case shifted violently. They are old. From before Lily was born. Mia frowned at his expression. Do you know him? Ethan didn't answer right away. Through the window, headlights swept briefly across the wet street and then vanished, a car slowing, then speeding on, or maybe nothing at all. But his instincts, dulled by 3 years of quiet cases and quieter grief, sharpened all at once into something he hadn't felt in a long time. I need to see everything else in that envelope, he said. Now. Mia's hand hovered over the papers, hesitating, and in that hesitation, in the fear behind her eyes, Ethan understood that whatever she was about to show him would change everything he thought he knew about his wife's death, and about the man he was slowly, unwillingly, beginning to become again. Mia spread the contents of the envelope across the kitchen table like a woman laying out evidence at her own trial. Photographs, mostly, faded, a few water-stained. A younger version of herself, laughing on a boat dock somewhere sun-drenched. Victor Reyes with his arm around her shoulders, dark eyes, and an easy smile that Ethan immediately distrusted, the way he distrusted anyone who smiled that easily in photographs from a life that had clearly gone wrong. We were together almost 2 years, Mia said, not looking at the photos, like she couldn't bear to. I was 23. Stupid, in love, Didn't ask enough questions about where his money came from. She exhaled. By the time I understood what he actually did, who he actually worked for, I was already in too deep to just walk away clean. What did he do? Ethan asked, though he already suspected the shape of the answer. Moved money. Lots of it. For people who didn't like being asked about it. Mia's jaw tightened. I found out I was pregnant with Lily about 6 months before the accident. Boat explosion, they said. Faulty fuel line. They never recovered a body, just debris and a lot of blood that matched his type. She finally looked up at Ethan. I told myself it was real. I had to. I had a daughter to raise and a dead man's shadow to run from either way. Ethan sifted through the photographs slowly, his detective instincts running quiet calculations beneath the surface of his expression. Do you have anything with names? Associates, handlers, anyone he worked with directly? Mia hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from beneath the photos, a list, handwritten, edges soft from handling. I copied this from his phone once, when I got scared enough to think I might need it someday. I never used it. Never told anyone I had it. Ethan scanned the names. Most meant nothing to him. But halfway down the list, one did. Castellano. The same name that had appeared, 5 years ago, in a financial trail Ethan had been chasing before the case went cold, before his captain told him to drop it, before Laura died 3 months later, before his entire life became something unrecognizable. He kept his face still. Old training. Never let a witness see you rattled. But inside, something had shifted violently into place, like tumblers in a lock finally aligning. I need to keep this, Ethan said. And I need you to think carefully. Has anyone approached you recently? Called, followed you, shown up some way unexpected? Mia shook her head, then stopped. There was a man. 2 weeks ago. At Lily's school pickup. He wasn't a parent, I know all the parents, but he was standing by the fence, watching the kids come out. When I looked at him directly, he left. I told myself I was being paranoid. You weren't. The words came out harder than he meant them to, and Mia flinched slightly. Ethan softened his tone, aware suddenly of how close he was standing, how the kitchen light caught the exhaustion carved into her face, the particular exhaustion of a person who'd spent years bracing for something she'd hoped would never come. I'm going to install cameras, he said. Front, back, the side door. I want a log of every car that comes down this street for the next 2 weeks. And I want to meet Lily, not to scare her, just so I know what I'm protecting. Mia's eyes softened at her daughter's name, some of the fear in her posture giving way to something more maternal, more fierce. She's going to ask 100 questions. She always does. I can handle questions. For the first time since he'd arrived, Mia almost smiled. We'll see. Lily Whitfield came home from school like a small storm of energy, backpack bouncing, rain boots squeaking against the hardwood, a drawing clutched proudly in one hand before she'd even gotten her coat off. She stopped dead in the living room doorway at the sight of Ethan, sizing him up with the unfiltered scrutiny only children seemed capable of. Are you a policeman? She asked. Used to be, Ethan said. Mommy said someone broke into our house. Lily's brow furrowed with a seriousness that looked out of place on her round 6-year-old face. Did you catch them? Not yet. But I'm going to make sure they can't come back. Lily considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence, then apparently decided he passed inspection, because she thrust her drawing toward him. This is my dog. I don't have one yet, but I'm getting one. His name is going to be Waffles. Ethan looked down at the crayon drawing, a lopsided brown blob with 4 stick legs and enormous ears, and felt something in his chest crack slightly, unexpectedly, like a hairline fracture in ice he'd thought was solid all the way through. He hadn't been around a child, not really, not since Laura died, since the future they'd talked about, quietly, in bed at night, the future that included a version of this exact scene, had been taken before it ever had the chance to become real. "Waffles is a good name," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Lily beamed like he'd handed her a trophy, then skipped off toward the kitchen, already narrating a new story to her mother about a girl at school who claimed to have a pet snake, a claim Lily found deeply suspicious. Mia watched Ethan's face during the exchange, and something passed between them, an understanding neither said aloud. Whatever walls Ethan Cole had spent 3 years building, Lily Whitfield had just put a crack in one without even trying. That night, after cameras were installed and Mia had gone through the motions of an ordinary evening, dinner, bath time, a bedtime story audible through Lily's cracked door, Ethan sat in his car outside the house, the list of names from Mia's envelope spread across the dashboard under the dome light. Castellano. He typed the name into a secure database search on his laptop, one of the few tools he'd kept access to from his old department contacts. The results loaded slowly against the weak signal. Financial records. Shell companies. A name that connected, through 3 degrees of corporate separation, to an account the department had flagged 5 years ago during his investigation into a laundering network that moved dirty money through a chain of legitimate-looking real estate holdings. An investigation Ethan had been quietly, unofficially, still chasing threads of even after his captain shut it down. An investigation that had put his name on paperwork Victor Reyes's associates would absolutely have had access to. His phone buzzed. "Sarah. You get through the Whitfield case okay? Anything I should know?" He typed back, "Might be bigger than a break-in. Can you pull the Reyes boating accident file for me? Old case, 5 years back. Off the books if you can." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Cole. That case has nothing to do with the Whitfield woman. Why are you asking about Reyes?" He stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Because I think he's not as dead as everyone thinks. And I think he might be connected to Laura's case." The dots appeared immediately this time, then stopped. A full minute passed before Sarah's reply came through. "Come to the station tomorrow. There's something you need to see. I was going to call you about it anyway." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "What is it?" "Laura's case file. It got flagged last week during a records audit. New evidence surfaced, evidence that was never logged the first time around. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." Ethan sat frozen in the driver's seat, rain sliding down the windshield in slow, deliberate lines, the porch light of Mia Whitfield's house glowing warm and steady just beyond the glass, a fragile, unknowing beacon in the dark. 3 years of grief, of unanswered questions, of a case he'd never fully let go of despite every reason to move on, and now, in the space of a single evening, 2 threads he'd never imagined were connected had tangled together into something he wasn't sure he was ready to pull apart. He looked back at the house, at Lily's bedroom window, the little lamp shaped like a moon glowing behind gauzy curtains. Whatever was coming, it was already too late to walk away from either of them. His phone buzzed one final time. Not Sarah. An unknown number, sending a single text to a phone that shouldn't have been reachable by anyone outside his professional contacts. "I know you're watching them, Detective. Victor sends his regards." Ethan read the text 4 times before he trusted himself to move. "I know you're watching them, Detective. Victor sends his regards." The number was a string of digits with no area code pattern he recognized, spoofed, almost certainly. He took a photo of the message, then forwarded it to Sarah with a single line, "Call me first thing." Then he sat in the dark for another 20 minutes, engine off, watching the house, watching the street, watching nothing at all except the slow drum of his own pulse in his ears. Someone had been close enough to know his car. Close enough to know why he was here. That kind of surveillance didn't come cheap, and it didn't come from a man who'd been quietly hiding for 5 years out of fear. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment with Mia's list of names taped to the wall beside a corkboard he hadn't used since he left the force, string and pins reappearing in his hands like muscle memory he'd never actually lost, just set down. By 4 a.m. the wall looked like it had 5 years ago, right before Laura died, right before he'd been ordered to stop. 5 years earlier. Mia stood at the edge of the marina, salt wind pulling strands of hair loose from her ponytail, watching Victor Reyes load duffel bags onto a boat that belonged, officially, to a shell company registered in the Caymans. She didn't ask what was in the bags anymore. She'd learned, slowly and painfully, that the less she asked, the safer she was allowed to feel. "You're quiet," Victor said, not looking up from the ropes. "I'm pregnant," she said. His hand stopped. For a moment, just a moment, something crossed his face that looked almost like fear, almost like tenderness, before it hardened back into the careful blankness he wore like armor. "You can't tell anyone. Not Castellanos people. Not anyone." "Why not?" "It's your child too." "Because," Victor said, voice low and urgent, "the second they think I have something to lose, I become a liability instead of an asset. You understand what happens to liabilities in this business." She understood. She'd understood for months, in the sick, slow way understanding arrives when you've spent too long ignoring it. She left the marina that night and didn't tell him where she was going. 3 months later, the boat exploded 11 miles offshore, and the man who was supposed to be her daughter's father became a name in a police report instead of a person in a life. Mia hadn't slept either. She'd told Ethan enough of the truth to make him understand the danger, but not enough to make him understand her, not the girl she'd been at 23, naive and in love with a man who dressed his cruelty up as charm. She lay awake in the dark listening to Lily's soft breathing through the baby monitor she still kept, 6 years later, out of habit more than necessity, and thought about how close she'd come to being someone who never got out at all. At 6 a.m., her phone buzzed. A new number. A single photograph attached, Lily, at the school gate yesterday afternoon, taken from across the street with a long lens, clear enough to see the gap in her front teeth from where she'd lost a tooth the week before. No message. None needed. Mia was in the bathroom being quietly, violently sick when Ethan's car pulled into the driveway 40 minutes later. "She goes nowhere without me or someone I vet personally," Ethan said, staring at the photograph on Mia's phone, jaw tight enough to ache. "Starting today. I have work. I have a job, Ethan. I can't just. I'll arrange coverage. I know people." He was already moving, already pulling out his own phone, dialing a number from muscle memory. "Sarah. I need a patrol unit doing drive-bys on Whitfield Street, minimum 4 times a day, and I need someone posted near Lakeside Elementary during pickup and drop-off starting today." Whatever Sarah said on the other end made his shoulders tighten further. "I don't care what the budget says. Tell them it's connected to the Cole case. That'll move it up the list." He hung up without waiting for a response. Mia watched him with an unreadable expression, something between gratitude and unease, the particular discomfort of a woman used to protecting herself now watching someone else take that job out of her hands. "You said the Cole case. That's your wife." Ethan's silence answered before his words did. "Sarah found new evidence in Laura's file," he said finally. "Reopened last week. Before any of this happened with you. You think it's connected?" It wasn't a question. I think Victor Reyes's network is bigger and older than a single boating accident 5 years ago. I think I got too close to something before Laura died, and I think whoever made that decision might be the same person circling your daughter's school right now. He met her eyes. I need you to tell me everything you know about Castellano. Not the name on a list. Everything. Mia's face went pale in the early light. Castellano isn't a person, she said slowly. It's a name Victor used for the whole operation. A front. I never met anyone who used that name in person, it was just how he referred to who he answered to. Like a code. Ethan felt the floor of his understanding shift again. If Castellano wasn't a person, then whoever had approved eliminating a police investigation 5 years ago, whoever might have ordered a car forced off Route 9 in the middle of the night, could be someone hiding in plain sight. Someone with resources, patience, and no name attached to any of it. He met Sarah at a diner 2 blocks from the precinct instead of the station itself, her choice, made over the phone with a wariness that told him more than her words did. She was already in the corner booth when he arrived, manila folder pressed flat beneath her forearms like she was afraid it might try to leave without her. Talk, Ethan said, sliding into the seat across from her. The audit flagged Laura's file because of a discrepancy in the original accident reconstruction, Sarah said, voice low even though the diner was nearly empty. The brake line failure was ruled mechanical at the time. New forensic software run during the audit flagged inconsistencies with that conclusion, where patterns that don't match organic failure. Someone tampered with that vehicle, Ethan. He'd known. Some buried, wordless part of him had known for 3 years, the same way you know a room is cold before you consciously register the temperature. But hearing it said aloud, in Sarah's flat, careful cop voice, still hit him like a physical blow. Who signed off on the original investigation, he asked, forcing his voice level. That's the part you're not going to like. Sarah slid the folder across the table. Captain Renner pulled you off the Castellano financial trail 3 weeks before Laura died. Cited lack of resources, lack of evidence. I pulled his authorization records from that period. She tapped a line on the page. There's a wire transfer into an account linked to his brother-in-law 2 days after he shut your investigation down. I haven't proven anything yet. But it's not nothing. Ethan stared at the page until the words blurred. 3 years of grief he'd assumed was simply the shape of bad luck, of a wet road and a faulty part, and now it was rearranging itself into something with intention behind it, something with a name, even if that name was still hidden behind layers of shell companies and dead-end aliases. There's more, Sarah said, and something in her tone made him look up. The audit also flagged that Laura's phone records from that night were never fully pulled. I requested them yesterday. There's a call, 40 minutes before the crash, from a number that's since been disconnected, routed through the same telecom shell structure as 2 numbers connected to the Reyes financial network. She was talking to someone connected to Reyes. Ethan's voice came out hollow. Or someone connected to Reyes was talking at her, Sarah said gently. Ethan, I don't think this was random. I don't think it ever was. Outside the diner window, a car idled at the curb a beat too long before pulling away, and Ethan's instincts, the ones that had never fully gone quiet no matter how many years he'd spent trying to silence them, screamed that eyes were on him even now, even here, in a diner 2 blocks from the safety of a police station. His phone buzzed against the table. Mia's name lit up the screen, and beneath it, a single line of text that turned his blood to ice. Someone's outside the house. Ethan, please. Hurry. Ethan broke every speed limit between the diner and Mia's street, Sarah's voice still tight in his ear through the car speaker, dispatching a unit to meet him there. The rain had started again, fine and cold, streaking the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and every red light felt like an accusation. He pulled up to find Mia standing on the porch, phone still clutched in her hand, Lily's small silhouette visible through the front window where she'd clearly been told to stay put. A car, dark sedan, no plates visible from this angle, was just turning the corner at the end of the cul-de-sac, tail lights disappearing into the grey afternoon. "Are you hurt?" "Is Lily?" "We're fine." Mia's voice shook despite the words. He didn't come to the door. He just parked across the street and watched. For almost 10 minutes. When I opened the door to get a better look, he drove off. Description: baseball cap. Sunglasses. I couldn't see much else. She wrapped her arms around herself. Ethan, he wasn't hiding. He wanted me to see him. That tracked. A message, same as the text last night, same as the photograph of Lily at the school gate. Not an attack, an announcement. Whoever this was, they had the patience of a predator that already believed it had won, content to let the fear do the work before the violence ever became necessary. A patrol car rounded the corner 2 minutes too late, lights flashing uselessly against an empty street. Ethan gave the responding officer a clipped rundown while Mia went inside to check on Lily, and by the time he followed her in, he found mother and daughter sitting together on the couch, Lily's small hand wrapped tightly around her mother's, a cartoon playing on mute on the television, background noise meant to look normal for a child's benefit. "Is the scary man gone?" Lily asked when she saw Ethan, her voice small in a way that made something in his chest twist violently. "He's gone," Ethan said, crouching to her eye level. "And I'm not going anywhere." "Okay?" Lily studied him with the same solemn scrutiny she'd given him the first day, then nodded, apparently satisfied, and burrowed back into her mother's side. Mia met Ethan's eyes over her daughter's head, and in that look was something raw and unguarded, not just fear now, but a fragile, dangerous kind of trust, the kind that terrified them both because of everything it implied. That evening, after Lily was finally asleep and a second set of security cameras had been installed covering the street itself, Ethan and Mia sat at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee neither of them was drinking. "You don't have to stay tonight," Mia said. "I know this isn't." "I'm staying." He said it simply, without room for argument. "Couch is fine." She didn't push back. Instead, she wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at him with an expression he was starting to recognize, the look of someone deciding how much more truth to hand over. "You went quiet earlier. When you got here. Something happened before my text." Ethan considered deflecting. "Old instinct, old habit, never bring the client into the mess of your own case." But something about the exhaustion in her face, the shared danger now stitching their 2 lives together whether either of them had chosen it, made the deflection feel dishonest in a way he wasn't willing to be with her. "My wife's death is being re-investigated," he said. "New evidence suggests the car crash that killed her wasn't an accident. And there's a phone call on her records, 40 minutes before she died, connected to the same financial network your list of names came from." Mia went very still. "Ethan, I don't think it's a coincidence that Reyes's people are circling your daughter 3 years after they killed my wife," he continued, voice flat with the particular calm he only found on the worst days of a case, the calm that came right before things got very bad. "I think whatever Laura found out, whatever got her killed, might be the same thing you've been running from this whole time." "I never met her. I swear to you, I never." "I know." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, close enough that the gesture meant something anyway. "This isn't your fault. But it means I'm not just protecting you and Lily anymore. I'm hunting the people who killed my wife, and they're the same people hunting your daughter. That's not something I can walk away from, even if I wanted to." Mia's eyes were wet when she finally spoke. I've spent 6 years teaching myself not to need anyone. Not to trust anyone with the truth, because the truth is what gets people killed. She let out a shaking breath. And now there's a little girl in the next room who already loves you, and I don't know how to be careful anymore. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous. Ethan felt the walls he'd built over 3 years of grief groan under a pressure he hadn't invited and couldn't quite bring himself to resist. I promised myself I'd never let anyone matter again, he said quietly. After Laura. I told myself it was safer. For everyone. Is it working? Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. No, Ethan admitted. Not since a 6-year-old showed me a crayon drawing of a dog that doesn't exist yet. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile flickered across Mia's tired face, small, fragile, but real. For a moment, the danger circling their lives felt distant enough to breathe around. Then Ethan's phone buzzed on the table between them, screen lighting up with a name that yanked the moment away entirely. Daniel. His brother. The one person Ethan had spent even longer keeping at arm's length than he had the rest of the world, not out of grief, but out of a different kind of exhaustion, the specific weariness of loving someone who kept making the same mistakes and asking to be bailed out of the consequences. He almost let it ring out. Then he saw the second half of the notification, a text that had come in 10 minutes earlier that he'd missed in the chaos of the afternoon. Ethan, I need to talk to you. It's not about money this time. I think I did something really bad and I don't know how to fix it. Please call me back. Ethan stared at the message, cold dread pooling low in his stomach. Daniel's crises were usually predictable: debts, a bad bet, a landlord threatening eviction. This message read different. Scared, in a way his brother rarely allowed himself to sound. Everything okay? Mia asked, watching his face change. I don't know yet. He was already dialing. The call rang twice before Daniel picked up, his voice low and unsteady in a way that set every one of Ethan's instincts on edge. Ethan. Thank God. Listen, a pause, breathing that sounded too fast, too shallow. I owe some people money. A lot of money. And they said if I couldn't pay, I could work it off instead. Just passing along information sometimes. Nothing that seemed like it mattered. Daniel, what kind of information? Another pause, longer this time, heavy with the particular dread of a man realizing he'd already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. About you. Your cases. Whoever you're working for right now, the woman and her kid. His voice cracked. I didn't know it would matter. I swear to God, Ethan, I didn't know until today what they wanted it for. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone hard enough that his knuckles went white. Across the table, Mia watched his face drain of color, her own expression shifting from confusion into dawning, horrified understanding. What did you tell them, Daniel? Ethan's voice had gone deadly quiet. Everything, Daniel whispered. Where she lives. Where the kid goes to school. That you'd moved in to protect them. A ragged breath. Ethan, I think I led them straight to her. The line went dead. The silence after the call ended stretched too long. Mia's hand found the edge of the table like she needed something solid to hold on to. Ethan. What did he say? He set the phone down carefully, like it might detonate if handled wrong. My brother's been feeding information about you and Lily to whoever's collecting on his gambling debts. He says he didn't know why they wanted it. Not until today. Your brother. Mia's voice was tight, controlled in the way people got when panic was too large to express any other way. So this whole time, someone's known everything. Where we live. Where she goes to school. Because of. I know. Ethan's jaw was rigid. I'm not defending it. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to find out exactly who he's been talking to, and I'm going to end this. You said he's scared. Scared of what? Ethan thought back to the tremor in his brother's voice, the specific quality of fear in a man who'd finally understood the size of the hole he'd dug. I don't know yet. But I intend to. He called Daniel back 3 times over the next 10 minutes. No answer. By the 4th attempt, the call didn't even ring, straight to a voicemail box that hadn't been set up, the flat robotic tone of a phone that had been powered off entirely. He's not answering, Ethan said, already pulling on his jacket. I need to find him before whoever he owes decides he's more useful missing than talking. You can't leave. Mia's voice sharpened with something close to panic. Not tonight, not after what happened this afternoon. I'm calling Sarah. She'll send someone to sit outside until I'm back. He was already dialing, already moving toward the door, torn between 2 threats that had somehow, impossibly, become the same threat wearing different faces. Mia, I promise you, I'm not going far, and I'm not leaving you unprotected. She caught his arm before he reached the door, and for a moment neither of them moved, the space between them charged with something that had been building since the moment he'd knelt down to Lily's eye level and promised her the scary man was gone. Be careful, Mia said quietly. Please. Always He almost smiled, an old, worn-out joke he hadn't used in 3 years, one Laura used to roll her eyes at every time he left for a scene. Saying it now felt like crossing some invisible threshold he hadn't given himself permission to cross. Mia's hand lingered on his arm a beat longer than necessary before she let go. Daniel's apartment was above a laundromat in a part of the city that hadn't seen real investment in a decade, the kind of building where half the mailboxes hung open and unclaimed and the stairwell light flickered with the same erratic rhythm as Mia's porch light had the first day Ethan visited her house. He took the stairs 2 at a time, badge, old, technically expired, still useful for the doubt it planted, already in hand in case a neighbor needed convincing. The apartment door was ajar. Ethan's hand went instinctively to his hip, old muscle memory reaching for a service weapon he hadn't carried in 3 years, finding instead the compact pistol he kept for consulting work, drawn and ready before conscious thought caught up to instinct. He pushed the door open with 2 fingers, calling his brother's name into the dark apartment beyond. No answer. The living room was in disarray, not the chaos of Daniel's usual clutter, but the specific violence of a struggle. An overturned lamp, a broken glass on the floor, a smear of something dark against the pale carpet that Ethan's stomach recognized before his mind fully processed it. Daniel. He cleared the apartment room by room, adrenaline sharpening every sense into painful clarity. Kitchen empty, bathroom empty, bedroom empty, closet empty. No body. No brother. Just the evidence of a fight and a coppery smell that told him someone had bled here, recently, not long before he'd arrived. His phone buzzed. A text, from the same unknown, unlisted number that had reached him the night before. Your brother made a mistake. He's alive, for now. But you're chasing the wrong ghost, detective. Reyes doesn't send messages. Reyes is the message. Ask yourself who benefits from you believing he's the only monster in this story. Ethan read the message twice, cold dread threading through the anger already burning in his chest. You're chasing the wrong ghost. If not Reyes, then who? Someone was steering him deliberately, feeding him information calculated to unsettle rather than clarify, the mark of someone who understood investigative psychology, someone who'd perhaps studied the same textbooks Ethan had, or worked the same halls he once had. He photographed the scene, careful not to disturb evidence he'd need Sarah's official channels to properly process, and called her immediately. I need a forensic unit at my brother's apartment. Now. And I need you to trace the last cell tower ping on his phone before it went dark. Ethan, slow down. He's missing, Sarah. There's blood. Someone took him, and I think it's connected to everything else. A pause on the line, the sound of Sarah moving, keys jangling, a car door opening. I'm coming. 15 minutes. Do not go anywhere alone until I get there, you understand me? Whoever did this could still be watching that apartment. Sarah arrived in 11. By then Ethan had forced himself into stillness, standing at the window overlooking the street below, cataloging every parked car, every shadow, every possibility. The forensic unit moved through the apartment with practiced efficiency, and Sarah stood beside him at the window, voice low. Blood types consistent with a beating, not a kill, she said, reading from a preliminary note one of the techs had passed her. Someone wanted him alive. Wanted him scared, maybe. Wanted him compliant. Or wanted him as leverage. Ethan's voice was hollow. To control me. To control what I do next. Which brings us back to the message you got. Sarah pulled it up on her own phone, having forwarded herself the screenshot. You're chasing the wrong ghost. That's not the language of a low-level enforcer collecting a gambling debt, Ethan. That's someone educated. Someone who wants you doubting the direction of your own investigation. Which means someone's watching this investigation closely enough to know exactly which direction I'm heading. Ethan's mind raced through the short list of people who'd had access to his suspicions over the past 2 days. Sarah, trusted absolutely. Mia, who had no reason to sabotage her own protection. Daniel, now missing and possibly being tortured for information he barely had to give. And Captain Renner. The man who'd shut down his original investigation 5 years ago. The man whose financial records now showed a suspicious wire transfer 2 days after Laura's death. I need Renner's current whereabouts, Ethan said. Tonight. Sarah's expression tightened with the particular caution of someone about to say something they knew wouldn't be welcome. Ethan, if you go after a sitting captain with unverified financial records and a hunch, you will not just lose this case. You'll lose your license, your consulting contracts, everything you've rebuilt over the last 3 years. My brother is missing. Someone's stalking a 6-year-old girl. And the man who might have had my wife killed is still walking around with a badge and a pension. Ethan's voice cracked, just slightly, the calm finally splintering under 3 years of accumulated grief given sudden, terrible shape. Tell me what I'm supposed to lose that matters more than that. Sarah studied him for a long moment, old partnership and older friendship weighing visibly behind her eyes, before she finally nodded. I'll pull his location data through legitimate channels. Ethan thought of Mia, 3 days, not years, and yet the trust between them had grown in that short span with an intensity that defied all his careful rules about distance and self-protection. He thought of Lily's crayon drawing of a dog named Waffles, of the fragile new architecture of a life he hadn't meant to start wanting again. Understood, he said, and meant it as a promise to more than just Sarah. His phone buzzed one final time as he walked back to his car, not the unknown number this time, but Mia, a single message glowing on the screen that stopped him cold in the middle of the empty street. Ethan. There's a man outside Lily's school. He's not in a car this time. He's on foot, and he's walking toward the playground. Ethan didn't remember the drive to Lakeside Elementary. One moment he was standing in the street outside Daniel's building, phone burning in his hand, the next he was pulling into the school's front lot so fast the tires screamed against wet asphalt, already scanning the playground fence for a figure in a baseball cap, for anyone standing where a parent shouldn't be standing. Mia was already there. She'd beaten him by 6 minutes, having sprinted from her car the second the after-school aide called to say a man had been spotted lingering near the fence during recess pickup. She had Lily gripped tight against her side, the girl's face confused rather than frightened, too young yet to understand the specific gravity of the adults around her. Where? Ethan was out of the car before it fully stopped. Gone. Mia's voice shook. The aide said he left the second she called the office. Just walked away, calm as anything, like he wanted to be seen and then wanted to disappear right after. Wanted to be seen. Same pattern as the car outside the house. Same pattern as the photograph. Someone was building pressure deliberately, methodically, the way a predator herded prey toward exhaustion before ever needing to strike. Description? Ethan crouched slightly, scanning the perimeter even as he asked. Middle-aged. Gray jacket. The aide said he didn't look dangerous, that's what scared her most. Said he looked ordinary. Like someone's dad. Mia's arms tightened around Lily. Ethan, ordinary is worse. Ordinary means he could be anyone. He could already be someone we know. The thought landed with the weight of a struck match near dry grass. Ethan thought of the neighbor 2 doors down who always waved a little too warmly, the man from the community watch meeting who'd asked oddly specific questions about Mia's work schedule during a casual conversation weeks ago that Ethan hadn't thought twice about until this exact moment. Surveillance didn't require an outsider. Sometimes the most effective surveillance came from someone who'd already made themselves part of the landscape. We're not staying at the house tonight, Ethan said. I have a place, off the books, not in my name, used it for witness protection work before. We move now, quietly, no one sees which direction we go. Mia didn't argue. Some fights a person simply stopped having once the cost of losing became unbearable to imagine, and the look on her face said she'd crossed that threshold days ago. The safe house was a modest 2-bedroom on the edge of a neighboring county, registered under a defunct LLC Ethan had used for exactly these situations twice before in his consulting years. Sparse furniture, blackout curtains, a security system wired directly to his phone. Lily fell asleep on the drive, exhausted past questions, and Ethan carried her in himself, laying her gently on the unfamiliar bed while Mia tucked a blanket around her with hands that hadn't fully stopped trembling. She doesn't understand how serious this is, Mia whispered once they both stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind them. And I don't know how to explain it without breaking something in her that I can't fix. You don't have to explain it tonight. Ethan leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up with the adrenaline that had carried him through the last 3 hours. Tonight, you just have to keep her safe. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. Mia studied him in the dim hallway light, really studied him, the way she had that first day in her kitchen, except now the wariness had softened into something else entirely. You've barely slept in 2 days. You're chasing a case that's connected to your dead wife, your brother is missing, and you're standing in a stranger's house at midnight guarding a woman and child you met 4 days ago. A faint, disbelieving almost laugh escaped her. Why are you still here, Ethan? He could have deflected. Old habit, the reflex of 3 years spent keeping every door shut before anyone got close enough to see what was behind it. But something about the exhaustion in his bones, the rawness of the day, made the deflection feel like a luxury he no longer had patience for. Because 4 days ago I was a man who told himself he was fine being alone forever, he said quietly. And then a little girl showed me a drawing of a dog that doesn't exist, and her mother looked at me like I was someone worth trusting even though every instinct she had told her not to trust anyone. He met Mia's eyes. I don't know how to walk away from that. I'm not sure I want to know how. The hallway felt smaller suddenly, the space between them charged with 3 years of grief and 4 days of something neither of them had asked for but neither seemed able to resist. Mia's breath caught, visible in the way her shoulders rose and stilled. I'm scared, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Not just of Reyes. Of this. Of you. Of how much I already. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every chance to step back, to reconsider, to close the door he could see her wanting to close out of pure self-protective instinct. She didn't step back. The kiss, when it came, was quiet and careful, the kind of first kiss that carried the full weight of everything unsaid rather than the urgency of passion, an acknowledgement more than a beginning, a fragile agreement that whatever else the next few days brought, this was real, and worth protecting alongside everything else. When they broke apart, Mia let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. This is a terrible time for this. Probably the worst time, Ethan agreed, and for a moment, just a moment, the fear that had gripped the entire day loosened its hold enough for something softer to exist alongside it. Ethan woke at 5 a.m. to his phone buzzing insistently against the nightstand of the guest room he'd taken for himself, a text from Sarah lighting up the dark. Got Renner's financials pulled through legitimate request, logged as part of the reopened cold case. You need to see this in person. Also, found something on the neighbor you asked about. Come to the station. Bring coffee. Long morning ahead. He dressed quietly, checked the security feed on his phone to confirm the safe house remained undisturbed through the night, and left a note for Mia on the kitchen counter before slipping out into the grey dawn. Sarah was waiting for him in a small conference room at the precinct, 2 case files open on the table, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much either. Renner's brother-in-law's account received 4 separate transfers over the 18 months following Laura's death, Sarah said without preamble, sliding the financial summary across the table. All routed through the same shell structure connected to the Reyes network. It's not proof he ordered anything specifically, but it's proof he was compensated for something, right around the time he shut down your investigation. Ethan's hands tightened on the edge of the table. And the neighbor? Sarah pulled up a second file, a DMV photo alongside a name Ethan didn't recognize. Gerald Voss. Moved into the house 2 doors from Mia Whitfield 14 months ago. Runs a small consulting business, or claims to. I couldn't find a single verifiable client. But I found this. She turned her laptop toward him, pulling up an old corporate filing, a registered agent's name buried in the fine print of a defunct real estate holding company from 6 years back. The same shell company structure connected to Victor Reyes's original laundering network. He's been 2 doors down this whole time, Ethan said, voice hollow with the specific horror of a threat that had been hiding in plain sight for over a year, watching, waiting, embedded so thoroughly into the ordinary rhythm of the neighborhood that no one had thought twice about his friendly waves or casual questions. There's more, Sarah said, and something in her tone made Ethan's stomach drop further. I ran facial recognition against the DMV photo, cross-referenced with old surveillance stills from the original Reyes investigation 5 years ago. She turned the laptop fully toward him, 2 images side by side, Gerald Voss's driver's license photo, and a grainy surveillance still from a marina camera, time-stamped 6 years prior. Same jawline. Same eyes, despite the added weight, the different haircut, the wire-framed glasses that hadn't been there before. Ethan, Sarah said quietly, I don't think Gerald Voss is an associate of Victor Reyes. Ethan stared at the 2 photographs, the ground beneath the entire case shifting violently, irrevocably, into a shape he hadn't let himself consider until this exact moment. I think Gerald Voss is Victor Reyes, Sarah finished. And I think he's been living 2 doors down from his own daughter for over a year. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The 2 photographs sat side by side on Sarah's laptop screen, and the longer he looked, the more the resemblance calcified into certainty, the set of the jaw, the particular way the eyes narrowed at the corners, aged but unmistakable beneath the added weight and the careful reinvention of Gerald Voss. He's been living 2 doors down, Ethan said finally, voice flat with disbelief. For 14 months. Watching her raise his daughter. Waving at her in the driveway. Which means the break-in wasn't him casing the house, Sarah said grimly. He already had every access point memorized. The break-in was something else. A message, maybe, or a search for something specific he didn't already know. Lily's school folder. Ethan's mind raced back to the first day, to Mia's trembling hands laying out photographs on her kitchen table. He wanted current information. Confirmation of her routine, maybe, or documentation he could use. He straightened, fury and fear tangling into something cold and purposeful. I need to get back to the safe house. If he's realized I moved them. He hasn't, Sarah said, checking something on her phone. I had a unit doing a discreet drive-by of Voss's house 20 minutes ago. He's still there. Garage door open, car in the driveway. Either he doesn't know you relocated them yet, or he wants you to think he doesn't know. The distinction mattered more than Sarah's tone suggested, and both of them knew it. There's something else, Sarah added, more carefully now. Daniel. Ethan's stomach dropped. Tell me. Patrol found him an hour ago. Dumped outside Mercy General, beaten up but stable. He's refusing to talk to anyone but you. Daniel looked smaller in the hospital bed than Ethan had ever seen him, smaller than the reckless kid brother who used to talk his way out of every consequence, smaller than the grown man who'd spent a decade cycling through the same mistakes with the same charming apologies. A split lip, a bruised orbital bone, ribs wrapped tight enough that every breath looked like a negotiation. You look terrible, Ethan said, pulling a chair beside the bed. You should see the other guy. Daniel's attempt at a smile turned into a wince. Kidding. I didn't get a single punch in. 3 of them. Professional. Didn't ask about money at all, actually. That's what scared me. What did they ask about? Daniel's eyes slid away from his brother's face, guilt written into every line of his battered expression. You. Specifically you. What you were working on, who you were protecting, how close you'd gotten to figuring out. He stopped himself. Figuring out what, Daniel? They asked if you and the woman had gotten close. Personally close. Daniel's voice dropped, shame thick in every syllable. I didn't know what to say. I said I thought so. I'd seen the way you talked about her on the phone, the couple times we'd talked this week. I didn't think it mattered. I swear to God, Ethan, I thought it was just gossip to them. Ethan went very still. Why would that matter to them? Because, Daniel said, voice barely above a whisper, the guy running this, the one they kept mentioning, real careful, like even saying his name scared them, he doesn't just want the girl anymore. Not just as leverage. Daniel's eyes finally met his brother's, wet with something between fear and guilt. He said if you'd let yourself get attached to them, that made you predictable. Made you someone he could use. That's a direct quote, Ethan. It makes him predictable. The words landed like a physical blow. Every instinct Ethan had spent 3 years suppressing, every wall he'd let Mia and Lily crack open over the last 4 days, had been observed, catalogued, and weaponized by a man who understood exactly what love cost a person willing to protect it. Who told you this? Ethan's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Who's the one they kept mentioning? They never used a name. Daniel swallowed hard. Just called him the architect. Said he built the whole operation from nothing after everyone thought he was dead. Said he'd been patient for years, waiting for the right moment to come back for what was his. His hand found Ethan's forearm, gripping with more strength than his battered body should have allowed. Ethan, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear on everything I have left, I didn't know what I was handing them until it was already too late to take back. Ethan sat with the weight of it, his brother's guilt, the confirmation that Vos Reyes had been watching not just the house but Ethan himself, cataloguing his emotional investment as a vulnerability to exploit. Whatever gentleness had existed in Vos's 14 months of quiet, patient surveillance, this was the truth beneath it, a predator who'd learned that the fastest way to control a man like Ethan Cole wasn't through threats against himself, but through the people he'd finally let himself care about again. His phone buzzed. Not Sarah. Not Mia. The unknown number. Ask your brother what else he told us, detective. Ask him about the safe house. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He looked up sharply at Daniel, whose face had gone the color of ash the moment he read the message over Ethan's shoulder. I didn't tell them about a safe house, Daniel whispered. I don't even know about a safe house. You didn't have to. Ethan was already standing, already moving, already dialing Sarah's number with hands that had gone cold and steady with the specific calm of a man staring down the worst possible outcome. They tracked my phone. Or my car. Or they've had someone on me since I left the house this morning. He didn't wait to hear the rest of his brother's apology. He was already running. The unit Sarah had posted for the discreet drive-by wasn't answering their radio. The safe house's security feed, when Ethan pulled it up with shaking hands in the hospital parking lot, showed nothing but static where a live camera image should have been. He called Mia's phone. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail, an eternity that felt like the entire architecture of his rebuilt life collapsing in real time. On the 5th attempt, she picked up, breathless, whispering. Ethan, there's someone in the house. I heard the back door. Lily's with me, we're in the closet, I don't know how he got past the... The call cut off. Not disconnected. Cut off, the specific dead silence of a line deliberately severed. Ethan was already in his car, tires screaming against wet pavement, 40 minutes of highway between him and the only 2 people in the world who'd finally cracked his walls all the way open, and no way of knowing, for one endless, terrifying stretch of road, whether he'd reach them in time. Sarah cleared the scene personally, walking the perimeter with a flashlight while Tex dusted for prints that both of them already suspected wouldn't exist. Mia sat wrapped in a blanket on the porch steps of a second, hastily arranged safe location, this one a departmental property under Sarah's name rather than Ethan's, untraceable through any channel Daniel could have compromised, with Lily finally asleep against her side, exhaustion overtaking fear the way it only could for a child too young to hold on to terror for long. The photograph of Laura, Sarah said quietly, joining Ethan at the porch railing once the scene had been processed. I ran the timestamp against her known movements. 2 days before she died, she filed a report with the department's internal compliance office. I found it buried this afternoon, misfiled under an unrelated case number, which is either an administrative error, or someone made sure it wouldn't surface easily. Ethan's chest tightened. What did she report? Financial irregularities. She'd been doing freelance bookkeeping work on the side for a property management company. Remember, she picked up small clients after leaving her firm to have more flexible hours. Sarah pulled up a scanned document on her tablet. One of those clients was a shell entity that traced back, through 2 more shells, to Castellano's network. She must have noticed discrepancies in the books and reported it internally, not realizing what she'd actually stumbled into. She never told me. Ethan's voice cracked on the words, 3 years of assuming he understood the full shape of his own grief suddenly revealing itself as incomplete. She never said a word. Maybe she didn't think it mattered yet. Maybe she was going to tell you once she understood more. Sarah's hand found his shoulder, old partnership steadying him the way it had through 100 worse nights on the job. Ethan, this isn't about what you missed. It's about who made sure she never got the chance to tell you at all. Renner. The name came out like a curse. The compliance report would have crossed his desk. If he was already compromised by then, Sarah didn't need to finish the thought. Ethan finished it himself, silently, the picture assembling into something almost unbearable, his wife discovering a threat to the network on her own, independent of him, and dying for it while he'd spent 3 years assuming her death was collateral damage in a case that had actually never touched her at all. "I need to talk to Renner directly," Ethan said. "Tonight?" "Absolutely not." Sarah's voice hardened. "You go in half-cocked on a hunch and unverified financial records. You don't just blow the case, you give him time to destroy whatever's left of the trail. We do this by the book, Ethan, or we do it never." Before Ethan could argue, his phone buzzed, not the unknown number this time, but a text from an address he didn't recognize, forwarded through an encrypted messaging service. He opened it warily. "Detective Cole. My name is not important right now. What is important? I worked for Castellano's network for 6 years before I got out. I have documentation of the Route 9 order, financial records tying Renner to the payoff, and testimony about who gave the final authorization. I'll trade it for protection. My family is in danger the same way yours is. Meet me tomorrow, alone, at the address below. Come with backup and I disappear for good." Ethan stared at the message, every instinct warring against itself, the desperate need for the truth against the very real possibility of a trap, a message sent by the same architect who'd left a photograph of his dead wife on a kitchen counter hours earlier, calibrated precisely to exploit exactly this kind of desperation. He showed the phone to Sarah, who read it twice before her expression shifted into something grim. This could be exactly what it claims to be. Or it could be Voss finishing what he started tonight, pulling you away from Mia and Lily, isolating you somewhere he controls. "I know." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm going anyway." "Ethan? If there's a chance this is real, a chance to actually end this instead of just reacting to whatever he throws at us next, I have to take it." He looked at her, exhaustion and resolve tangled together in his expression. "But I'm not going in blind. I want a tracker on me, a unit 2 blocks out, and you monitoring everything in real time." Sarah held his gaze for a long moment before nodding, reluctant but resigned. "You get one shot at doing this the smart way. Don't waste it." Mia found him 20 minutes later, standing at the edge of the porch, staring out at a night that had gone quiet again in the deceptive way danger always seemed to after its worst moments passed. Lily was asleep inside under Sarah's watchful supervision, and for the first time in hours, Mia and Ethan stood alone with nothing but the sound of crickets and distant traffic filling the space between them. "You going somewhere tomorrow?" Mia said. "Not a question. I saw your face when Sarah left." He told her about the message, about the informant's claim, about the risk he intended to take despite every warning bell it triggered. Mia listened in silence, arms wrapped around herself against the night chill, and when he finished, her expression carried a complicated mixture of fear and fierce, unwavering support that undid something in him all over again. "If this is real," she said slowly, "it could end everything. Reyes, Renner, all of it. If it's not real, it could be exactly what gets me killed and leaves you and Lily unprotected. Then you come back." Her voice was steady despite the tremor beneath it. "You promised her the scary man was gone, Ethan. You don't get to break that promise because you decided protecting the truth was more important than protecting yourself." He crossed the small distance between them, taking her hands in his, the gesture carrying none of the hesitation that had marked every moment before their kiss 3 nights earlier. "I'm not choosing the truth over you. I'm choosing to end this so we get to have an us that isn't built on constant fear." He pressed his forehead against hers, breathing in the mixture of exhaustion and courage she'd carried through every terrifying hour of the last 4 days. "I promised her the scary man was gone." I intend to keep that promise permanently, not just for tonight. Mia's hands tightened around his. Then let me come with you. Mia. I know his face better than anyone. I lived with him. I know how he moves, how he thinks, what makes him dangerous in ways your files never will. Her eyes were fierce despite the fear still evident beneath the surface. If there's a chance this ends tomorrow, I want to be part of ending it, not hiding somewhere waiting to find out if I've lost you too. Ethan wanted to refuse, every protective instinct screaming that the safest place for her was as far from this confrontation as possible. But looking at her now, at the strength she'd built out of 6 years of running and hiding and protecting her daughter alone, he understood that refusing her wasn't protection. It was erasure of exactly the resilience that had kept Lily safe long before he'd ever entered their lives. Sarah won't like it, he said finally. Sarah doesn't have to like it. She has to keep Lily safe while we do this. Mia's jaw set with a determination that mirrored his own. Tomorrow, we end this. Together. Neither of them noticed, in the charged quiet of that decision, the dark sedan parked at the far end of the street, engine idling low, a figure behind the wheel watching the porch light with the patient, proprietary attention of a man who had waited 5 years for exactly this moment to arrive, and who had no intention of letting either of them walk away from tomorrow's meeting on their own terms. The address led to an abandoned warehouse near the old shipping docks, the kind of location that appeared in enough case files to feel almost cliched, except Ethan knew from long experience that criminals chose isolation for practical reasons, not dramatic ones, no witnesses, multiple exits, easy to control. He and Mia approached at the agreed time, Sarah's surveillance van parked 2 blocks out exactly as promised, tracker sewn into the lining of Ethan's jacket transmitting a steady signal back to a team ready to move at the first sign of trouble. The warehouse door stood open. Inside, a single figure waited in the dim light filtering through broken skylights, not the informant they'd expected. Victor Reyes stood in the center of the empty floor, dressed simply, without the disguise of Gerald Voss's glasses or careful haircut, looking exactly like the man in Mia's old photographs except aged, harder, his easy smile replaced by something colder and infinitely more patient. "Hello, Mia," he said softly, and the warmth in his voice was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. "You look well. Motherhood suits you." His eyes shifted to Ethan, that same terrible warmth curdling into something calculating. "And you, detective? Right on time. I was beginning to wonder if you'd figured out yet how close I've been this entire time." Mia's hand found Ethan's, gripping tight enough to bruise. "Where's the informant?" The message said. There was no informant. Reyes's smile widened, slow and unhurried, a man who'd waited 5 years and felt no need to rush the final act now that the stage was finally, perfectly set. There was only ever me, waiting to see if the great Detective Cole would risk everything he'd rebuilt for the truth. His gaze moved past them both, toward the warehouse's shadowed edges, where the soft scrape of footsteps announced they were no longer alone. "And now that you're both here, together, exactly where I wanted you, let's finally discuss what happens to the family I never got to have." The footsteps multiplied in the shadows, 2 men, maybe 3, moving with the unhurried confidence of people who believed the trap had already closed. Ethan positioned himself slightly in front of Mia without breaking eye contact with Reyes, every old instinct from 15 years on the force narrowing into a single, focused calm. "You said you wanted to discuss family," Ethan said, voice level despite the adrenaline roaring beneath it. "Let's start with mine. Laura found your financial trail through a bookkeeping client. She reported it internally. 2 days later, someone made sure she never got the chance to testify to what she'd found." Something flickered across Reyes's face, not guilt, Ethan realized with cold clarity, but something closer to professional acknowledgement, the specific pride of a man discussing a job well executed. Your wife was thorough. Admirable, even. Renner brought her report to me directly. He'd been on my payroll for 2 years by then, ever since I first pulled him off my trail during your original investigation. I gave the order myself. Nothing personal, detective. Just an unacceptable risk that needed removing before it spread. The confession, spoken so casually, so devoid of remorse, hit Ethan harder than any threat could have. 3 years of grief crystallized suddenly into something sharper, colder, not the aimless mourning he'd carried for so long, but purpose. You've been building this network back up for 5 years, Ethan said, stalling, aware of the tracker in his jacket lining, aware that Sarah's team needed time to close the 2 blocks between the van and the warehouse. Fate your death, went underground, and the entire time you were rebuilding, you were also watching your own daughter grow up 2 doors down. Why? Insurance, Reyes said simply, and for the first time something almost human cracked through his composure, a father's specific, twisted logic dressed up as pragmatism. A man in my position needs leverage that can't be traced or seized. A child no one knows exists is worth more than any offshore account. His eyes moved to Mia, and something colder settled there. I would have preferred to do this quietly. Take her, disappear, let you both grieve a kidnapping instead of understanding what actually happened. But you, his gaze returned to Ethan, made that considerably more complicated by falling in love with a woman I still consider mine. She was never yours, Mia said, voice shaking but resolute, stepping fully beside Ethan rather than behind him. I left you before Lily was even born. You don't get to claim either of us just because you decided, 5 years too late, that you wanted a family. Reyes's expression hardened. He raised a hand, a small gesture, and the men in the shadows stepped fully into the dim light, 3 of them, positioned to block every exit Ethan had mapped on the walk-in. Take them both, Reyes said quietly. Alive. I still need the girl. What happened next unfolded in the compressed, adrenaline-slowed time that Ethan remembered from every worst night of his career. He shoved Mia hard toward the cover of a support column as the nearest man lunged, years of training taking over where conscious thought fell away, a disarming strike, a controlled fall, the specific economy of violence that came from a man who'd trained his whole life to end confrontations quickly rather than dramatically. Gunfire erupted from the warehouse's far entrance, not aimed at Ethan, but a warning volley from Sarah's team breaching exactly on schedule, flooding the space with tactical lights and shouted commands. Reyes's men scattered or dropped, training against professionals proving far less useful against actual law enforcement than it had against a single detective and a frightened mother. Reyes himself moved fast, faster than his composed demeanor had suggested, breaking for a side exit even as officers swarmed the main floor. Ethan went after him without hesitation, years of grief and fresh fury driving him through a maze of shipping crates and broken equipment until he finally cornered Reyes at a loading dock overlooking black water, nowhere left to run. It ends here, Ethan said, weapon raised, breathing hard. You don't get to disappear again. Reyes turned slowly, hands raised in mock surrender, that same terrible warmth still somehow present in his expression even now. You could shoot me. End it cleanly. But then you'd never have the satisfaction of watching me stand trial for what I did to your wife, watching me lose everything slowly, the way you did. He tilted his head. Or you could let me walk, and know that somewhere out there, I'm still capable of finding you both again someday. No, Ethan said, you won't. Sarah's voice cut through the dock's darkness, backed by 3 officers with weapons trained. Victor Reyes, you're under arrest for the murder of Laura Cole, conspiracy, embezzlement, and a list of charges long enough to keep you occupied explaining yourself for the rest of your life. She stepped forward, cuffs already out, professional satisfaction evident despite the exhaustion in her voice. Ethan. Stand down. Let us do this by the book, so nothing gets thrown out later on a technicality. For a long, taut moment. Ethan didn't move, every ounce of 3 years' grief screaming for a different ending than the one procedure demanded. Then he thought of Mia, waiting somewhere behind him in the warehouse, of Lily asleep at a safe house believing the scary man was already gone. He lowered his weapon. "Cuff him," he said. "And get Renner's arrest warrant moving tonight. I want every name in that network exposed before the sun comes up." 3 weeks later. The trial process would take months, Sarah warned him. Reyes's lawyers were already maneuvering, Renner's defense already constructing a narrative of coercion and ignorance that would likely fail against the weight of financial records and Daniel's recovered testimony, given willingly now, atonement replacing the guilt that had nearly cost him his life. Gerald Voss's identity, dismantled piece by piece, unraveled into a portrait of a man who had spent 5 years perfecting the art of disappearing into ordinary life while never once relinquishing the ambitions that had made him dangerous in the first place. But the danger, at least, was over. Real, verified, permanently over, confirmed by federal agents who'd rounded up the remaining pieces of Castellano's network in the weeks following Reyes's arrest, dismantling the shell companies and financial trails that had shadowed both Ethan's grief and Mia's fear for years longer than either of them should have had to carry it. Ethan stood in Mia's kitchen on a quiet Saturday morning, sunlight pouring through the window in a way that felt different now, not just illumination, but warmth, the specific golden quality of a house that had finally, fully exhaled. Lily sat at the table, tongue between her teeth in fierce concentration, coloring a new drawing with the kind of focus only children could summon for something that mattered enormously and would be forgotten by lunchtime. "What are you making?" Ethan asked, leaning over her shoulder. "It's us," Lily said, like it was obvious. She held up the paper, 3 stick figures beneath a lopsided yellow sun, a 4th smaller shape beside them that was unmistakably a dog. "That's Mommy, that's me, that's Waffles." She pointed to each figure in turn, then paused at the 4th, considering him with the same solemn scrutiny she'd given him the very first day. "And that's you." Something in Ethan's chest, already cracked wide open over the last month, broke entirely, not with grief this time, but with something so full it nearly stole his breath. "Can I keep this one?" he asked, voice rougher than he meant it to be. Lily nodded, already reaching for a fresh sheet of paper, the moment already passing into the next thing the way childhood moved so easily, so mercifully, past even the heaviest days. Then she paused, looking up at him with an expression more thoughtful than usual, weighing something in her small, serious way. "Mommy says you're staying. Like, always staying." She tilted her head. "Is that true?" Ethan glanced toward the doorway, where Mia stood watching, coffee mug in hand, the same wary, hopeful expression she'd worn that very first day now settled into something steadier, something that had chosen, deliberately and completely, to trust again. "If that's okay with you," Ethan said carefully, crouching to Lily's eye level the way he had that very first afternoon, "then yes. I'm staying." Lily considered this with the gravity of a judge delivering a verdict, then broke into a grin that lit up the entire kitchen. She threw her arms around his neck, small and fierce and utterly without reservation, the way only a child who'd finally stopped being afraid could hug someone. "Okay, Daddy," she said, simple and easy, like the word had always belonged to him and she was only now getting around to using it. Ethan froze, breath catching somewhere between his chest and his throat, 3 years of carefully guarded grief finally, fully giving way to something he'd promised himself he'd never let himself feel again. Across the kitchen, Mia's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding, her free hand pressed to her mouth, watching the 2 people she loved most in the world find each other completely. "Okay," Ethan managed, voice thick, arms tightening around the small girl who'd cracked his walls open one crayon drawing at a time. "Okay, baby girl." Outside, the sun climbed higher over a street finally free of watching cars and hidden threats, over a house that had become, against every promise Ethan had once made to himself, exactly the kind of home he'd sworn he'd never let himself want again, and exactly the kind of home he now understood he'd never truly stopped needing. He'd promised himself he'd never love again. He was, at long last, glad to have broken that promise completely. The end.